Oh yeah, that
Wow.
button. That button. Sorry.
That button.
Sorry.
Maybe I should put my glasses on so I can see you. Actually, I've been seeing you all around today as I
Yeah,
was
I,
driving, and
I'm back at.
you were in my ear, even though I couldn't really watch you unless I had a pit stop, But you were around.
It was all over the place.
What are you wearing, Michael Bryant
Yeah,
of
no,
Justice Serve? What are
it's
you wearing?
who. It's who are you wearing?
I'm sorry.
Come on,
Who are you wearing,
come on.
Michael Bryant? I'm
That's a
wearing
very good
Dolce and
question. Let me
Gabbana.
let me let me double check.
I'm wearing
Calvin
Dolce.
Klein. Sorry,
I'm
Calvin
wearing
Klein.
Dolce and Gabbana. That's the question you threw out? Hi, I'm Linda Kenney Baden, by the way. It's the question you threw out at Alan Jackson and Karen Reed because they're gagged. So what did you throw out?
Karen Reed was able to talk, but I respected the gag order,
Yeah,
and I just asked Alan Jackson who he was wearing. So
yeah. It's kind of like you're on the red carpet.
it
You were
was
as
like my days at Extra. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
You did that. Did you do the Oscars and all? And who are you wearing?
Who are you wearing? And
Who
and
are you wearing?
he was caught a little bit off guard, and then rallied to say a suit.
Oh, you
So
did. Okay, I
he did.
missed that.
Yeah,
I missed
yeah.
it. Okay.
He laughed and he said a suit.
A
So next
suit.
time, of
Okay.
course, I
Did you
will
get that
have
to
to.
Hank Brennan? How about the Hank Brennan? Did you get to ask
No,
him?
I did not see him. He generally slinks in. I mean, comes in the it's like the. I'm not sure if there's a message in this, but in the handicap ramp, the disabled, that what do they call that? The access ramp. I don't know what they call it now politically, but anyway, it's the ramp goes up the side of the building and doesn't really come
Mhm.
up the gauntlet.
Well,
So
but when you're carrying like a suitcase or briefcase of
usually,
files, usually the ramp is an easier way to go. I always find that when
well,
I find that at least when I'm in heels.
I think if you were coming up the front of it, so you can see the stairs right behind me. It's a
Yes.
shorter route. He's not like a frail dude. Let's just say if you go down the ramp, it's a zigzag, longer route, but you avoid a lot of confrontation. I'll put it that way.
All right. All
All right.
right. Well,
They
you
still
mean
yell at
I
him.
don't know. I think in that courthouse, the judge was giving him main credibility, is giving him some street credibility in the courtroom, at least.
Yeah. Well. Anyway, it doesn't trickle out into the street. I'll tell you that.
But you were there. You were there since last night. You've been in Canton and Dedham and Stoughton. You're all around. Are you tired?
Yeah.
Let me ask you this before we get into the case. Are you a little tired, my man?
No, not it's the adrenaline is you're just flying, and then when I crash, I will crash, but I'm fine. I'm good. Yeah.
Good, good, because we have a lot to talk about. I'm going to let you tell everybody
Let
what
me. Oh,
yeah. ADA, American Disability Association, says Tammy Glaze Knapp Simon. Yeah, it's an ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act.
that's what it is. It's an accommodation, and this as
Accommodation.
old as this courthouse is, they had to retrofit it, and they actually did a pretty good
Good.
job. Yeah,
Good. I'm
it's
glad
kind
they
of
had a
seamless.
retrofit. I have a lot of
Yeah.
people who are disabled. Even when you're not. When I had 10 years ago, I had a double bilateral hip replacement at the same time. And let me tell you, it wasn't much
You need
fun
it.
going up those stairs
Sure.
with two hip replacements at the same time.
Sure. I need an emotionally handicapped entrance. It's a whole different thing.
Oh,
Hey,
you blaming me for your problems?
no,
No.
no. Are you defensive? I want to say to Scott McGinness, who I appreciate and ran into over at the Stoughton courthouse, got his contact info. I may have been less than clear about when we're going to have him on, but we will. I just won't be at this moment. So if you were kind of planning and hanging around for that, Scott, thank you, and we will definitely be in touch because as we steamroll toward this trial, we're going to talk to a lot of folks who
Yeah.
have some definite opinions. We're going to talk about the day to day. What do you think about
Well,
this piece of evidence? What do you think about that?
he is available right now. He
Oh, he
says.
is. You want to bring him
Uh,
on? It's up to you.
yeah, if we can get if Missy can get him a link,
Yeah, we'll
and
leave
he's
that.
not sure about tomorrow. So
Okay.
since he's there, you met him, and you can tell
And
us
he's
who
usually in
Scott
the
McGinnis
chat.
is.
Yeah, he's in the chat a lot. So
Yeah.
if you guys can work it out, great. I'm kind of handcuffed at this
Okay.
point.
Missy's going
So
to try to do that among her other things. So just
yeah,
have
nothing else
patience,
going
Scott.
on.
Yeah, lot happening with Justice Serve TV today. I have to
Okay.
tell you though, before we get into today,
Yeah.
we had the major interview with Aidan last week, Aidan Kearney last week, Dr. Turtle Boy at Doctor. He spells it out Turtle Boy, and he was wearing a jacket, and we approached it as we do a normal interview, regular journalists. We try to be respectful to everybody with a little bit of humor because some subjects are very difficult, right? And the amount of venom that I received in my personal X account, my Twitter X, formerly Twitter, account was unmatched to yours, hardly any. Just to serve TV, I didn't see anything, but it was constant for 2 days. It gave me great notoriety. It gave me great visibility. My Twitter analytics went through the roof. So I want to thank you all for being there, because all you wanted to do was attack me for interviewing as part of our journalist team here at Just to Serve TV, somebody who is a major player in this case. So thank you again for doing that.
Yeah, they got nothing else to do. All right, so it's a mess. I don't engage in that junk. I got other stuff to do. But
well, it's kind of interesting, because there was a whole discussion about whether or not it was a sexist attack, because they didn't attack you, they didn't attack Just to Serve TV, they attacked me. Now, and then some people were calling me by my first name, and I said, if you know me, you can call me by my first name. But if you don't, usually I'm Mrs. Kenney Baden, Miss Kenney Baden, Miss Kenney, Mrs. Baden, something like that. I don't allow people who are attacking me off the street to call me by my first name. And then they got all upset about that and all indignant about that. But I think they got to turn inward and look at themselves, right? So.
Yep, and they seem to have a lot of free time, so maybe they should spend a little bit in front of the mirror and kind of,
Yeah. So, but anyhow, they picked the wrong person. They probably should have Googled what I do for a living and who I am before they attack me, because I don't get intimidated. And I've told them that, and I'll say it right to their face right now. And they're like, "Oh, you shouldn't say that." Well, there you go.
Yeah, let's jump into what happened over in Stoughton. I see the Lisa P43 going to say so overjoyed. Turtle Boy gets to go home to his kids. And it was. Kind of touch and go there for a minute or two. As you may recall, Linda, we thought, and it was reinforced by Aidan this morning when I talked to him, that this was going to be cut and dried, pro forma, boring arraignment. He'll read the formal charges or just advise them, and maybe they'll waive the reading. And then Aidan would say not guilty, and then boom, we'd move along. Didn't quite play out that way, right?
Right. No, as a matter of fact, I was listening to it. And quite frankly, I'll let you go through what happened, but I have to say, I had kind of liked last week when we first saw him, or 2 weeks ago, Mr. Cosgrove. I thought, okay, he's just trying to do his thing. We even had a show on it that, he wasn't really supporting a couple of the charges. But today, with this little move that he pulled, and you explained it, I was like, and cross him off my book.
Yeah, really, I think the legal term is really shitty. What he did. So here's the deal. As of last Friday, the attorneys are talking all the time. They're civil, I guess, apparently even when being backstabbed. So Cosgrove, who, by the way, is a special prosecutor because Norfolk doesn't have enough normal prosecutors. They have to keep having guys parachute in. So this is a guy retired, used to be a judge, So he's handling these very serious witness intimidation charges against Aidan Kearney. And on Friday, he had talked to Aidan's attorney and basically suggested this is going to be just boom, in and out, like many arraignments are. Most arraignments are. It's not the place to really argue the merits of a case. You're just hearing the formal charges and entering a plea. So that's what they come into this morning. When I talked to Aidan on the steps behind us here this morning, he was cautiously optimistic that it was going to be as his attorney had been told by Prosecutor Cosgrove it was going to be. And then lo and behold, we get in there, and I told the story before, so if you were on with us earlier when I was with Dina, I apologize, but I think setting up is important. So they're like 50 supporters. They allowed to queue up inside the courthouse and then into the courtroom. And it was 30 minutes or so while we're waiting. And I see attorney Bradel, right? Am I pronouncing that right? Bradel?
Yes.
Yeah. He goes in and out of...
Doesn't have an E at the end. It ends with L.
Yeah. He goes in and out of the door that is marked district attorney. Every courthouse has, even if their overall office is not in the courthouse, they usually have a space for them. He's in and out of there, going into the lobby to talk with Aidan, back and forth. And this is weird. This is weird. If this is going to be such a quick in and out arraignment, they're spending more time now than they're likely to spend in the arraignment. Well, when we sat down in there, we found out why. At the last minute, the prosecutor, Cosgrove, decided he was going to seek revocation of Aidan's bail. That was never on the table as of last Friday. Whole 3 days had passed. And so They got in there. The motion to dismiss was made by the defendant, by Aidan, ultimately denied, which is not uncommon. This is harder than any other motion to dismiss because all you're looking at is probable cause. You don't have to find much to continue forward with a case at this level, right? So
Right.
the judge, acknowledged, yep, I get it, understand, but the level here, probable cause, denied. So that took us to the second analysis, which was this new and improved motion to revoke the bail based on this. I call it the pizza incident, which occurred last week when we were up here, in which Aidan Kearney mugged for a camera. It was a goofball, probably not the best thing to do, but criminal, probably not, in my opinion, and in most legal people's opinion. You don't think it was a criminal act, do you?
No, especially
Okay.
since he had no idea that the camera was recording him outside, because why would you think that the camera had the audio to record on not just video? Like most of us, like I have cameras all around our house for obviously security reasons, did not record audio for something called the wiretap walls.
Yeah, and so it was interesting that the court pointed out that for the first 25 seconds, Aidan just stared into the camera, suggesting that even without audio, there was some intimidation attempted. Anyway, so he gets past that, and Cosgrove is suggesting that on Friday, I had no intention of seeking a revocation of bail, not a plan. Well, so you're thinking, well, what happened, genius? What changed your mind? Two things he mentioned. One was this Mark Betterow letter about the wiretap that might exist if, in fact, that camera, one or both of them, is recording audio outside D&E Pizza. And the letter was to Chief Rafferty, the Canton police chief, to tell her, you might want to look into this because these guys might be creating continual wiretap violations anytime somebody walks down the street and they pick up their conversation. Two-party state means anybody being recorded has to say it's okay, has to give a consent. So that led to apparently a flood of complaints from folks that Aidan Kearney had advised that, according to Mark Betterow, maybe these are crimes that are being committed. And maybe you are a victim of such a crime, and maybe you ought to file a complaint. So the prosecutor felt like that was one strike that led him.
Not only that, if I may interrupt you,
please.
as I tend to do, he suggested, and this is what almost made me drive off the road, that the sending of the letter itself was retaliation.
Yeah.
Indicating to me not only retaliation by Aidan Kearney, but possible retaliation of Mark Betterow being an agent. And I literally almost drove off the road with that. I was, because I didn't see it, but I could hear it. And I was incensed that somebody who would report a crime to the police, or what they thought was a crime to the police, can then be accused of doing something so unbelievably ridiculous as retaliatory under the terms of witness intimidation.
Yeah, it was definitely a surprise that he would go in that direction. Maybe just a veiled threat, maybe just to lay the foundation for what he was about to say. But he goes on to point out that alone didn't do it. It wasn't just that, but just yesterday, Monday, happy St. Pat's Day, he hears Turtle Boy do a broadcast in which he's railing against Elizabeth Proctor. Now, everybody will know that John Proctor, the Proctor Factor, has had now 3 hearings that are arguably disciplinary hearings. And after, according to some, but not everyone, the federal investigation into wrongdoing in his investigation of the Karen Reed case has been ended, meaning he's not going to be found culpable, or at least accused of anything, any wrongdoing. That seemed to be a victory, I guess, that led to this Proctor family letter, and Elizabeth Proctor front and center. She also did an interview on one of the local stations. Turtle Boy decided he was going to rag on her and said some, maybe sexually insensitive things about her, and let her know and the Proctor family know how he felt about that situation. That, according to Cosgrove, was it. That's what, that tears it, as they say. That was the last straw. And because of that, he decided all of a sudden, and according to counsel for Aidan 5 minutes before the hearing, that he was going to seek revocation of Aidan's bail. So that was the big cloud hanging over this hearing, and nobody knew how it was going to go. This judge, by the way, was a fill-in judge. It was not Walsh, who was on vacation. Another, unknown in the mix. So as it turns out, the judge is listening to Cosgrove's argument, lets him go on and on about all of these things that triggered his desire to seek revocation of the bail. And then Bradel gets up and really just barely begins to address, the thought of his client going back into jail because of this revocation. And the judge cuts him off and says, that let me just, cut you short here. And Linda, when you hear the judge say, let me just cut you short, it can go either way.
Oh, absolutely.
It's not necessarily a good thing, right?
Right.
But I got the impression maybe it was. Maybe like this guy's heard enough. And what he said was, look, if that argument is worthwhile, it should have been made at the first hearing for this matter. When was that? Last week. Remember, they dropped the bomb on Tuesday. That's when Cosgrove said, oh, by the way, I've just been made aware of this whole pizza incident. And, of course, Bradel got upset and said, wait, you can't just bring that out of the blue. So they set a hearing for the next day at noon. That was the hearing in which this judge says any request to revoke bail should have been brought up. And because you did not bring it up then, you have waived that as an issue. Bye-bye. And with that, collective sigh of relief in the courtroom. Aidan, who is generally pretty loosey-goose guy, I mean, I could tell he was a little knotted up there. The sphincter factor was pretty tight. And at that point, he could breathe and noticeably relax. And so it ended well for him, all of his supporters. And he went off to hopefully spend some time with the family and kind of wait for whatever the next round might be.
But he did say he was going to do his show tonight, which apparently he does at 9 o'clock at night.
Trying to stop him.
and that this is not going to stop him in terms of having this over his head. But I have to tell you, normally when an attorney calls you and says, a prosecutor, or when I was a prosecutor, and said, look, this is the bail I'll be looking for. I'm not going to be looking for this, or we're not going to, we're not going to oppose you getting bail, or we are going to oppose you. That's the way it is. It's the attorney relationship between attorney relationship. You have to count on your opposing attorney to let you know, just like the judge says something about counting on attorneys today, right? To then get, as we heard, to court and 5 minutes before the hearing, and the prosecutor says, oh, by the way, wait, I have changed my mind. We are now going to, oppose you having bail. We're actually not going to oppose it. We're going to ask for revocation of your bail on these charges. And that seems to tell me maybe that's why they didn't agree to an adjournment, the prosecutor, right? Remember when we spoke to Aidan, he was supposed to be adjourned because Mark Betterow couldn't make it. And usually there's an agreement with attorneys. If one needs an adjournment, you all kind of go along because you may need an adjournment another time. Sure. And maybe that's what happened. Maybe the DA decided they weren't going to grant the adjournment and they were going to come in. And it wasn't so, oh, gee whiz, I just changed my mind because I learned. It was because they planned to ask for the revocation of bail.
That's possible. And they did push it to noon, which became almost, I think 12:39 was my notice to when we actually started. But it also
you were in the courtroom,
in
right?
the courtroom, yeah. Me and 50 of my closest friends there, the gathering, and it may also have something to do with Judge Bev pulling the plug on today's activities here in the courtroom behind me. We expected this to go full day, probably trickle into tomorrow, but they had scheduling issues. Nothing tomorrow. They'll pick it back up on Thursday, but they only got through about 5 motions out of the 40-ish today. Right. So it may have had something. That whole thing may have evolved in that way because that allowed all of the Aidan Kearney / Karen Reed supporters to caravan to Stoughton and show up in mass there, and it just was cleaner and easier. Nobody's back and forth trying to figure out what's happening now and then. So whether purposeful or by accident, it worked out great for those who are interested in both these cases.
Yeah, no, but it really was. And then by the way, sui generis, greetings, question. So indictment for Karen Reed said she beat and assaulted John O'Keefe. How does that work its way into the vehicular manslaughter? All right, you want to jump to that and then jump back to finishing up with
go ahead.
Aidan?
Go ahead.
Okay. So let's read it again. Sui Generis. Thank you, Sui Generis. I love that handle. Reading again. Greetings. Questions. So indictment for Karen Reed and she beat and assaulted John O'Keefe. How does that work its way into the vehicular manslaughter murder? And the assault is by the car, is by the SUV, I should say, or as the cops would say, by the vehicle. So that could actually be the second count. It could be the first count, and it also was a specific charge on the third count, right? The ones that the jurors, we think, probably acquitted her on, indicating that maybe she didn't touch him with the car at all. But the beating, I don't think it's beating like beating, with your fists and all that. It's beating with the car. The car is
the instrument.
The car is the instrument of the assault. If there was a car that hit him, actually, that would be the battery. Okay, let's be clear about this as lawyers. Assault is putting somebody in fear that they're going to be hit or touched or hurt in some manner. Right? The fear is the component. When you actually complete that assault, like if I were able to reach over and hit Michael right now, that would be the battery. Okay, so assault has one meaning, battery has another, and they've become combined in vernacular talk. We always say assault and battery because you can't have a battery without an assault, because you could be hit with somebody that seeing.
Sure, somebody hits me from the back of the head, and I never apprehend that it's coming, or I don't have a fear of it happening. Yeah, that's battery without the assault.
It. So that's really how it works. It works in. I don't think the prosecution is really going to go to she abused him physically with her hands in any way. I don't think they're going to go there.
Either poorly pled or just poorly written in the indictment.
Certainly poorly tried, if that was a theory.
I was railing on grand jury process earlier, how I think it's antiquated. It's just not the best way to do it, because you got all the citizens who don't know much. It's a one-sided presentation. I just think forget it. Just forget it. Just go to normal complaints and move along to preliminary hearings. But anyway,
now going back to where you were, the question I had for you, because you were in the courtroom, just because the judge, who was, by the way, I was surprised it wasn't Judge Walsh, right? Because he was our person of the week last week for treating these charges very fairly. This judge wasn't really into it. He was like, okay, that's not my case. I've had enough, right? But that doesn't mean that the whole issue of wiretap doesn't get moved to another motion to dismiss when it doesn't involve the issue of bail, right, Michael?
Yeah, and remember that all of the cases pending here against Aidan Kearney are still up in the air. There was a motion to dismiss made for those that has not been responded to. So that's still an unknown. They're letting him twist, and I think the date they agreed to for the new charge was May 15. So what happens between now and May 15? Anything? They'll be hopefully halfway through the trial or more. That'll be 6 weeks into the trial.
To be Baden, to be the poodle. Kenney Baden's birthday.
Is your birthday May 15th? Or it's
no,
between now and May 15th?
To be the poodle.
Oh, well, sorry. Okay, of course.
Just look at my Instagram and you'll get it.
Okay. So I see Scott has popped by. You want to bring him on now and chat, or what's you call the shots?
I haven't met Scott, so
okay, let's do it right now then. There he is.
And I hope, Scott, I hope you don't mind that I called you by your first name. I figure since you wanted to be on our show, that's okay. And you may call me Linda because you are a guest on our show.
Hi.
So this is Scott McGinness. You may not recognize him without his sign, but usually
I'm out of uniform. Yeah.
The big sign over his shoulder there. So welcome, sir. I was talking to Dina earlier from the Stoughton court, and just chatting with her about her involvement in this movement, I'm calling it. Give us your involvement. How did it happen, and why are you so passionate about it?
A long-time turtle rider. Prior to Aidan's story coming out in April of 2023, story 1. when he basically broke this case wide open. I've been full speed ahead since that day. I started attending the pretrial hearings. I think it was July of 2023, and I pretty much go to every court date. So
Wow.
I became, amongst the fold in the Free Can Read movement, and the OGs like Dina and the Sweeneys and all those people have been down in front of this court since pretty much July of 2023. Is that famous footage you'll see on Court TV when we're up on the steps of the courthouse, which was quickly banned. So that I think that was the July 2023 court date.
And how is that in relation to, we've heard about the Canton Nine and all. Were you on board before or after? In terms of people watching and knowing about everyone that's really had some significant trauma related to this case by supporting the Free Can Read movement.
Well, I mean, the Canton Nine were boots on the ground in front of the courthouse. They just decided that at that particular day to set up camp across the street from D&E Pizza and do a little demonstration there, and that didn't go well with the townies. Chris Albert has all his connections to the DA's office. There was already a special prosecutor, Kenneth Mello, on the Turtle Boy case, because when they started coming after Turtle Boy for all this witness intimidation, obviously DA Michael Morrissey was conflicted out of the situation, so that's when he hired Kenneth Mello. And Chris Albert seems to have these direct lines to Lieutenant Detective Trooper Tully. He had a direct line to Kenneth Mello, and that's when he called Kenneth Mello, and Mello called Canton PD. Hey, these 9 protesters are across the street from D&E Pizza, because Chris Albert was butthurt over it. And that Kenneth Mello is the one that pretty much devised and concocted the weaponization of the witness intimidation statute in Massachusetts, which is poorly written. It's probably one of the worst in the country. It includes emotional harm and financial harm, which is obviously in direct conflict with the First Amendment of our country. It's the law needs to be changed. If you look at Timothy Bradel, who abhors the Massachusetts witness intimidation statutes, he wants them rewritten or fight them all the way to SCOTUS. That's how much Timothy Bradel abhors the witness intimidation statute in Massachusetts. It's far too broad.
Yeah, I think he's almost made a career out of it. But I tend to think that it's not as much the statute's fault as it is the people using it.
Correct. It's never been weaponized until now. I think that law was last revised circa 2013. And I think what happened was it went through the legislature, and I think the emotional harm and the financial harm aspect or prong of that statute was tacked onto it, and I probably assume, I don't know the case law at that time, like why the current statute was amended to be what it is now, but I can imagine it was probably a DV situation or whatever. Oh, we need to protect witnesses, right? So they added the emotional harm prong to it and the financial harm prong to it with all good intentions, right?
Right.
And then the law kind of just got used like it was supposed to be used. And then you have in my opinion, a corrupt DA's office like Michael Morrissey with his sneaky special prosecutor, Kenneth Mello, reading over the statute and saying, oh, you know what? We can weaponize this statute. We have this pain journalists, Aidan Kearney, Turtle Boy, exposing all the corruption in our county. This is how we can get them back. And then they were using it on Aidan first, and then they started the Canton Nine, Richard Schiffer, and the distribution of the rubber ducks, which came out of the Alan Jackson quip from Trial 1. If it walks like a duck, quacks like a duck, it's a duck. So that's how the duck thing came in. So
which also led to some witness intimidation charges that were ultimately dropped.
Right. So Walsh down in Stoughton. So Stoughton District is where anything that happens in Canton, Stoughton, or whatever, it goes to the district court first. So it goes to Stoughton, which, DA Michael Morrissey's office is in Canton. So Stoughton is like the first level epicenter of Morrissey's power. You know what I mean? So they file these criminal complaints. It goes to Stoughton District. I mean, Turtle Boy's had problems there. Previously, there was McAlbert's trying to get RPOs placed on Turtle Boy, or he's harassing me or whatever. And the funny thing is that it's easier to weaponize this witness intimidation statute and make it have teeth than it's far more difficult to get a protective order, because you have to have physical threats or whatever. The standard in this terribly written witness intimidation statute is the standard's way lower. All you have to do is cause emotional harm or financial harm. So it's actually easier to charge somebody with witness intimidation in Massachusetts than it is to get harassment protection order or the higher restraining order. You have to meet a higher bar to get those orders from a judge in Massachusetts. But you have a corrupt special DA like Kenneth Mello. He's been replaced with Cosgrove, a retired Massachusetts judge. But this is the first DA in Massachusetts, or his special prosecutors, because DA Morrissey likes to do this. He puts himself on the sidelines and hires these special prosecutors. Now we're seeing it in the Karen Reed trial too, which is ridiculous. He's only got 40-something DAs in his office that refuse to prosecute Karen Reed in trial 2 because they don't want to sail on a ship of fools. But anyways, these McAlberts have tried to get harassment prevention orders placed on Turtle Boy, and they failed. And Turtle Boy went to Stoughton District Court to get the transcripts or dockets, and one of the clerks that work there, freedom of information, public information, she gave those to Turtle Boy, and DA Michael Morrissey found out about it, and he actually had her terminated.
Wow.
That's how much power DA Morrissey has in that courthouse. Wow. He can call that courthouse and just throw his weight around. So, we look at it as Free Karen Reed or Turtle Boy supporters. We look at Stoughton District Court as almost like a joke, because DA Morrissey can get on his burner cheesy banana email or make a few calls down at that courthouse, and he runs it like a puppeteer.
I thought it was interesting today when Attorney Bradel was talking to the court about the common sense that should be applied to some of these allegations and these charges. He said Stoughton gets it. Now, he's obviously digging, the court here when he says that, but he was referencing the Canton 9 and others where those charges have been dismissed. I think he cited 5 different cases.
Mainly Judge Walsh, because Walsh is getting tired of this. At first it was Kenneth Mello, and now it's Cosgrove, and they're dragging all these crazy witness intimidation cases into his courtroom, and he's literally done with this, because I think that judge is just seeing like how ludicrous this is.
It's like the same time
he's on vacation. This week we had the fill-in judge
Right.
Cosgrove makes a long-winded argument about all the terrible things Turtle Boy's doing. And it got scary there for a minute.
Maybe another reason, Michael, that was going on. Not only did they change their mind and they wanted to try to revoke bail because they knew Judge Walsh was on vacation. But let me tell you, Sui Generis, thank you, Sui. I'm disgusted that 2 attorneys in different cases have now called Mr. Betterow, who's an attorney for Dr. Turtleboy, unethical in open court, yet it's untrue, and they are protected. It is disgusting. And then she follows up, Sui Generis, thank you very much. She follows up with another donation. We really appreciate it. And then another, and thank you very much. I just want to say Linda's my hero. Thank you very much, as well as Dr. Baden. He's my hero too. Been watching trials since early 90s. Love Linda's ethics and style. She has been an example for me, for my life and success today. So generous, thank you very much. And you can send us, Michael and I, an email to our email, which is justiceservedtv@gmail.com. Identify yourself and I'll respond back to you, and we can talk. Love to hear it. Thank you so much for being such a big supporter. And it's people like that allows us to bring our show to you and to have people like Scott on. And Scott, do you feel in any way that you are intimidated, that you really can't do or exercise your First Amendment like you'd like to because you're scared that charges will be brought against you?
I mean, I certainly wouldn't go down onto Washington Street in Canton right now and post up across the street from D&E Pizza. But as far as attending town select board meetings, going to court, Stoughton District. Today we were demonstrating in front of the Superior Court in Dedham, and then we switched up and went down to Stoughton. Do I ever feel like I'm in danger of being charged with anything or being arrested? No, I don't have that fear. The only thing we had was last year in trial 1 when D.A. Morrissey concocted that motion for the buffer zone, which was originally 500 feet. And it had some other crazy things in there, like the free Karen Reed animals can't have free Karen Reed on them, or, it was nuts.
Well, look, that's you bring that up, and they brought up a new one for this year, which they haven't addressed yet. You have that LKV?
I have it right here.
Which includes
for buffer zone
the
and
ability to use reasonable force to enforce any violation. What's your thought on that?
I think the previous buffer zone, Bev rolled it back to 200 feet, and that was her compromise. You couldn't go past that 200-foot barrier toward the front of the courthouse with anything that said free Karen Reed. No signage. American flags were allowed. But, some days in trial 1, we had 300 people out there. Some people not regular free Karen Reed demonstrators. Their first day there, and they're going down to the Registry of Deeds building to use the bathroom, and they forget that they have their free Karen Reed, apparel on. And the State Police Community Action Team guys, headed by Sergeant Michael Hardman, the state troopers that we see in front of the court,
right.
They're kind of on the regular, so we know this particular Community Action Team group of troopers. We have a good working relationship with them. But, during the height of trial 1, we had some pretty big crowds down there. Not all of them are regular free Karen Reed boots on the ground. So some people are a little confused. And, they would get a warning like, hey, if you're going to come down here by the courthouse, you have to put your sign away, turn your shirt inside out or whatever. But I think the last buffer zone didn't have any teeth. What they're trying to do now is get tougher with it. They want to be able to, like, if you walk down to the court and you still have your free Karen Reed shirt on, they want to be able to just bundle you and throw you in a paddy wagon. That's what Hardman's trying to make it sound like, anyways.
I can't wait to see that enforced. Yeah, I don't want anybody hurt, but I can't wait to see them try that.
I mean, I thought I thought us regulars, and we have a large group of regulars, pretty much on a daily basis during trial one. I thought we were very well self-disciplined. We didn't have any issues, and even days when we had huge crowds there, the regulars are really good at, talking to the new people and giving them the rundown and showing them where the buffer zone line was, and this is what you do and you don't do.
Speaking of that, Scott, since I'm right here, give me a visual as to, I see the barricade that protects really the sidewalk from traffic.
So you're on the registry
Is it
of
corner
deeds.
to corner?
They want to extend it, Michael.
So if you turn around and you're looking,
Scott, just 1 second. They want
Yeah.
to extend it because they said that it's not 200 feet. It's not good. They want to have the buffer zone extended to include the area encompassed within Bates Court, Bullard Street, Ames Street, and Court Street, and then of course, the mechanism, the reasonable physical force. Additionally, they have another situation, but so they're trying to extend this buffer zone because initially they wanted 500 feet. So really, it's almost like a 500 foot at one direction, right?
Correct.
It looks like it's the whole block.
If Michael turned around, if you turn around, Michael, right, you're looking at the Superior Court.
Right.
You look down to your right, you see where the church is.
Yep. Okay, that way. Okay.
So that the big green, that big lawn that abuts the corner next to the courthouse.
Okay.
The 200-foot mark was a barrel, maybe 6 car spots down on your left.
All right,
where
I got you.
Where the church green is.
Yeah.
So from that point past that, that's where most of us congregated by the church or across the street. They want to push us way back from there because all we had between our protest group was the church green, and then the if you turn around, the right side of the courthouse. They don't want us in sight at all. They want us farther back.
Right. They don't want you in sight.
And that's where we congregate.
Right. There's clearly they don't want you being able to be seen. They certainly don't want Karen Reed to see you coming in. They don't want you, they don't want the cameras walking past seeing you guys. Yay. They don't want it. That shows support that we see every day going and coming. They don't want that shown because they want to push you so far back that there's no way she's walking back there.
And they also
but obviously Karen Reed's not afraid of us.
No.
It's D.A. Morrissey doesn't like the look of us out there. That's what it is.
And they're saying, right or wrong, that you can hear it in the courtroom and that the jury can hear it. Now, I've not been up there when the crowd's been down below. It's been pin drop when I've been up there. So I don't know.
I think that's
true
exaggerated claims. I don't think they could really hear us that much. I really don't believe it. But it's not. It's even if we were at the 200-foot line, it's not like we were purposely like screaming and yelling, trying to disrupt the trial. I never saw that.
Yeah, I think that's a cop-out anyway. We've seen tons of trials. I was just covering the Daniel Penny trial in Manhattan. I'm in the courtroom. You can hear the screaming and yelling down below, and the judge makes an instruction to the jury. Don't pay any attention to that, and you hope that they can set that aside. To me, anybody in a jury that's swayed because they hear people yelling in the street, probably a problem anyway. But we've seen it before, and I think it's just a lazy excuse.
I mean, D.A. Morrissey's been upset with Free Karen Reed since we made Court TV and we were all up on the stairs. What he's been doing.
Now you're making Justice Serve TV. He's going to be even more upset.
Yeah, now
so now what he's doing is just trying to push us farther and farther away because it's a bad look. It makes his district attorney's office look bad. It has nothing to do with giving Karen Reed a free trial. It has nothing to do with her safety. And believe me, when jury selection began last year, right around this time, a couple of weeks, we were very respectful. We stayed way back because jurors post up where you are right now, Michael. They post up in that Registry of Deeds building.
Yeah, this is a great location.
And they walk them across the street to the front door of the courthouse. And we were very respectful of that. And then when the trial began, Judge Kearney decided to bust the jury in from a secret parking lot in another portion of Dedham. And we were told that the bus was going to pull up to the rear of the courthouse. And we were like, listen, even if we're in plain clothes and we're walking near the courthouse, the leaders in our group told the state police community action team and whoever else was out there, believe me, we totally respect it. We're not going to go back there. We're not going to make ourselves shown to the jury. I thought the buffer zone worked fine last time. But I guess they didn't like us congregating down by that church. We were still in sight. They just want to push us farther back.
Well, it's important to point out at this point, it's a request. There hasn't been any decision made
Yeah,
on
she
it.
hasn't ruled on it. I mean, she modified last year's. Morrissey asked for 500 feet and Bev cut it to 200 feet. So I don't know if she'll modify this motion by Michael Morrissey or Brennan, his, fill-in or whatever you want to call Brennan.
From the area, do you know of any other high-profile trials around that have had this type of buffer zone, whether it be in Norfolk County or Suffolk County or anything like that?
I know they did have one in Dedham there. I forget what year it was, because it was a case involved animal abuse, and PETA and animal rights people were going to be protesting near the courthouse. And there was a buffer zone at that courthouse because it was concerning of the defendant. What's so funny about this buffer zone, the ruse is it's, to give the defendant a fair trial, which is a joke. Karen Reed loves us out there. She doesn't care if we're out there. This is all because it's a bad look for the DA. That's all this buffer zone's for.
Yeah.
And I've never ever seen any situations in Massachusetts with buffer zones. I mean, I was in a lot of courthouses in my career. I was basically a state marshal. I used to bring inmates to trial. So, an inmate's already sentenced, but now he's up for his next murder case or whatever. I've been all 110 courts in this state over my career. So I've been in every court in this state, sat through countless trials, some very high profile ones. I've never seen buffer zone like this.
Let me just interrupt you for a second. Kay Schmidt, Gift of Justice TV served 5 memberships, but Sui Generous loves you. Scott knows everything. He's worked so hard for truth for as long for so long. Thanks, Scott. And then she, with a $5 donation, she follows up, Scott, because of you. God bless Scott. And thank you for having him on this show. So thank you very, 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 very much. And for all those who want us to also show the support for Scott in the show, please hit that like button. You got 400 watching right now, over 400 watching right now. Please hit that like button, because if we have likes, then we can keep inviting people like Scott on, because we're trying to show the other side. We're not, Michael and I, we've said a lot of times, we call it as we've seen it. I've been a prosecutor. I'm now a defense attorney. We call it as we've seen it, and we don't like some of the things we're seeing. Brooklyn's been a membership for 5 months. There's also a donation. By the way, Cosgrove admitted that the issue should be in civil court, lamented that it costs money and time. Thank you for your donation, a.k.a. the cat lady, but still insisted Aidan should be charged with this.
They were talking about how it's generally a defamation type situation, so that's a civil matter, and that it's elevated to a criminal matter when it becomes witness intimidation. So Cosgrove was admitting that there is that line. He of course felt that what Aidan had done crossed that line, but he did admit that there can be a civil component here, no doubt about it.
It goes back to what I was talking about. The witness intimidation statute has a lower bar. Yeah. So if you have a crooked DA that wants to weaponize it, which is now what's happened, it's turned into a Frankenstein roaming the countryside now. So you had these people trying to get harassment prevention orders placed on Aidan, and they couldn't win them because they didn't meet the criteria.
Yeah,
but
and
now a DA can just say it's witness intimidation.
Yeah, we saw with Aidan that turtle that was shot and put on his father's, hung up by its neck and put on his father's porch. And Brooklyn, by the way, thank you for being a member.
Well, part of the reason, Scott, you're right about this, that the statute is sort of poorly written, is it allows subjective fear, subjective emotional concern, subjective economic. Now you could press the economic and say, we'll prove you're going to lose money somehow based on these statements. But the emotional, all I have to do is say, I'm frightened by that. I feel intimidated. And that's enough.
I mean, I think you don't have to be an attorney or whatever. It's common sense. You're going to know what witness intimidation is when you see it, right? Like if you're about to testify against me because you saw me rob the store and I go up to you and say, Mike, you're not testifying or else, you know what I mean? Obviously, that's witness intimidation. The witness intimidation, which is so hilarious to me, is Aidan Kearney, Turtle Boy, is going up to the witnesses and say, hey, why don't you tell the truth? That's not telling them don't testify.
Yeah. How dare you ask me to tell the truth? That's frightening me.
As a matter of fact, Scott, Michael had told me that first when he was schooling me on what the charges were before we were doing our first show on this whole idea of intimidation. And Michael said, so ridiculous. He pointed at somebody and said, tell the truth. I said, no, he can't be being charged for witness of intimidation by telling them to tell the truth, can he?
Mm-hmm.
And oh, yes, he is.
Well, I mean, if you believe that I believe that these people are all in cahoots and they're all lying and making up a story. If you tell them to tell the truth, you're telling them to give themselves up and they get angry about it. Like, I'm intimidated.
You mean if I tell the truth, I'm going to be in trouble. I'm intimidated by that. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, that's how I look at it.
Yeah. So as being formerly in, law enforcement, right? Basically what you've done.
Well, I was basically a correction officer for 32 years, but for like 20 of those years, I was on the road. I was a marshal.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, marshal, law enforcement. I mean, these are some pretty amazing credentials. What do you see in the Karen Reed case that bugs you most? We talked about Aidan, but what do you see in the Karen Reed case that bugs you most as a person who has all of this experience, both as a marshal, corrections officer, but in the umbrella of law enforcement?
I mean, when I first read Aidan's story number 1, April of 2023. When you realize Canton PD, I believe the fix was in even before Canton PD arrived. I believe Brian Higgins went back to the Canton police station at 1-something in the morning. Calls were being made. All the connections were being put into place. I believe when Canton PD arrives at 34 Fairview at whatever time that was, 6 in the morning, they were already like hands off. We're not going in Brian Albert's house. We're not going to put up any crime scene tape or nothing because we don't want to draw attention to Brian Albert's house. They were actually lying about the address number of the house. They wanted to keep this on the down low. Don't make it a big deal. Don't draw attention to my yard. So you had no crime scene ever secured. Nothing was done correctly. It's just terrible police work. And then I thought about it some more. I go, no, this isn't incompetence. This is like done on purpose. You know what I mean? You have a dead or dying police officer on a front lawn. Obviously, they're gonna go in the house. Is there other victims in the home? Why isn't the homeowner coming out on his lawn? Why isn't Assistant Chief Kelleher across the street out here? Like, what's going on? So right there, that was like all red flags for me. Like, what are these people doing? And then Lieutenant Gallagher shows up with a leaf blower and solo cups. There's only a couple inches of snow on the ground. That's the other thing that drove me nuts about this case. ADA Adam Lunchbox Lally, the whole trial. How much snow was there? At 12:30, the alleged time of the incident, there was only like a dusting of snow. But by the time you get to 6 a.m., when they find John O'Keefe's body, there's 2-3 inches of snow max. The bulk of that storm was 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. later.
Yeah.
But the problem is, by the time the CERT team from the state police show up at 5 in the afternoon, now there is 18 inches of snow on the ground. And I think the ruse that they wanted to tell the jury and the public is imagining John O'Keefe buried in 18 inches of snow and nobody can see him.
Yeah,
That's one of the biggest lies of
weather
trial.
forecast. When we were doing this on Law and Crime when it first came through, I pulled out all the meteorological records and went through it hour by hour to talk about what snow there was, and more importantly, what snow there wasn't. Right. Oh, by the way, Scott, I went by 34 Fairview. Look, I found this just today. So.
They're going to charge Michael Bryant. That's going to be his piece 49 because he's found 2 pieces.
Yeah, they just keep popping up.
By the way,
well, I mean, if you remember trial 1 when they're showing the ridiculous and ludicrous footage of Lieutenant Gallagher out there with a leaf blower.
We were on Law and Crime.
That was one of the first things that we saw, and when
on Law and Crime, we were always on Law and Crime. And with not only that, the big red solo cups, and everyone started singing, this big red solo cup, and the leaf blower was what got me, because as a person who deals with forensic science and the proper collection, I've never heard anybody teach about red solo cups and a leaf blower. And thank you, Sui Generis, again. Karen Reed supporters are calm and don't do anything to harm anybody, basically, which you're saying, shaking my head.
So they do this leaf blowing and collection of blood droplets in the solo cups and put it in the Stop and Shop bag. And they take off. Canton PD abandons the scene at 8-something in the morning. Doesn't even leave a cruiser there. I mean, one of the Canton officers was saying it was too windy for the yellow crime scene tape or whatever. Yeah.
Not like there are any
like I don't care if it's 50-mile-an-hour winds. You leave a cruiser out there guarding the yard. It's a crime scene. Meanwhile, the time of death on John O'Keefe is kind of like a gray area. I've heard stories about hypothermia where they're doing life-saving efforts in the emergency room, and sadly, if the person doesn't make it, they still keep trying until the internal body temperature is up to a certain amount before they can call it or pronounce death. So in Canton, other than Boston, Worcester, and Springfield, and I think Holyoke, where those police departments, those big city police departments, can investigate their own homicides and unattended deaths, everywhere else in Massachusetts, Canton police, they're not the murder police. Once John O'Keefe was pronounced dead, the state police detective group attached to that DA automatically take over the case. That was one of the things that drove me nuts about trial 1. They were trying to say that Canton backed out because of a conflict of interest. But regardless of that conflict of interest existing or not, Canton PD would have lost it anyways. It would have automatically gone to DA Meatball Morrissey's state police detective group. So whenever John O'Keefe was pronounced, this would have been easier. Sadly, if John O'Keefe was pronounced on the scene, the state police would have took it over like right away. But because life-saving efforts were made and he was, brought to the hospital, and his time of eventual death is like delayed. But once the state police took it over, it would have been a situation if the secured crime scene was actually secured. The state police would have came over and relieved Canton PD, taken over the scene. But instead, they abandoned the yard. Meanwhile, Buchanan and Proctor are coming up with theories. Buchanan's calling the hospital saying we think it's the domestic violence. I don't know what their original plan was, to say he was hit by a plow, whatever. They were making this up all throughout the day. And then,
do you think the plow driver thought that he was going to get charged at any point? Do you think the plow driver?
I mean, Lucky. I don't think they. I mean, you got to remember, Lucky Loughran's brother is one of the select board members in Canton. And Lucky's the greatest, most honest guy. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think they would have done that to him. Never mind his familial connections to the townies. You know what I mean? That might have been one of their initial crazy ideas. Like let's say he got hit by a plow, and then they realized it was Lucky Loughran's route, and that idea died. And then they had because you got to realize when Canton PD does that first leaf blower search, there's no taillight in the yard.
Leaf blower search. That's a great way to put it. I don't think I've ever heard that before.
There's no taillight. All they found was a broken cocktail glass and a black cocktail straw. And there's only 2-3 inches of snow, even if you count for drifting here or there. No taillight in the yard at all. So I think it was like 10:30 in the morning. Buchanan's working on the DV, like he got beat up in the yard and somebody smashed the cocktail glass that he was holding over his head, or some crazy story they had. It wasn't until later, by the time you get to the afternoon, where you got like Jen McCabe running around with, creating yarns, creating some kind of story. You know what I mean? Like, and I think the other thing that happened too was they got the ring footage from One Meadows, and Proctor, whoever it was, saw Karen Reed backing out of John O'Keefe's garage, and she struck John O'Keefe's Traverse. And then there was talk about, the taillight's cracked. And I think that's when the idea light bulb went off. Like, oh, perfect. Her taillight's broken now. We'll just say she backed into him. But the problem was the car at that point had been driven south to her parents' house in Dayton. And that's when Proctor and Buchanan head down to Dayton to tow it out of there, which is ridiculous. Like, I don't know how even Proctor has the evidence to even come up with towing a car back from Dayton. He doesn't photograph the thing when he tows it. And instead of towing it back to the nearest state police facility, because now it's a state police case, they bring it all the way back to the scene of the crime, and they bring it to Canton PD's Sallyport, which is outrageous.
That may be the scene of another crime, but yeah.
So, I mean, our theory is, meanwhile, the yard's been unsecured all day. And they're not calling state police crime scene. They're calling state police search and rescue team to search the yard, which that doesn't make sense either. And they keep holding off the search team. Like, don't search yet. Don't search yet.
Could you tell everybody what that is, what the search team is? Because a lot of times it was said in court, and a lot of people who were not from Massachusetts didn't know what that was.
Search and rescue team. So say there's a missing person in the woods or a fleeing suspect. These guys are like, Army Rangers or whatever. They're going into the bush to find somebody or whatever. They're not crime scene. I don't know why they called CERT team guys. And we don't even know who was on that team. Nobody took a roster. There was people in that CERT team group that might not have even been state police. We've heard rumors that some of them were Canton police mixed in with snow shovels, whatever they were doing in that stupid search. But anyways, you get anything Proctor and Buchanan did, Tully, nothing's by the book. No crime scene secured. Proctor's lying about what time he tows the car from Karen Reed's parents' house in Dayton, which gives him another hour and 15 minutes of leeway time to get the car back to the Canton Sallyport. Meanwhile, the CERT team's communicating like, hey, can we start digging in this 18 inches of snow? Oh, no, hold on. Don't start yet. And meanwhile, we get the footage in the Sallyport where we believe the taillight pieces were being harvested and brought over to 34 Fairview. Maybe even one of the guys that grabbed the shovel already had the taillight pieces in his pocket, and as he's shoveling, he's just tossing them out there.
I don't know that could be the way that could be the way it happened. What we do know is that it was days and weeks before all of the pieces were found. How in anybody's brain does that make sense? Tell me.
I mean, I don't think it makes any sense, but when they found those first 4 or 5 pieces, they literally were only searching for less than an hour. They weren't digging all that long. They found 3-4 pieces, and they're like, yeah, that's good. Wrap it up. And then I guess that their story is somehow this taillight was buried under all this snow, and as the snow melted over time, more pieces appeared. But if you have the taillight and you only have 4 pieces and you see that there's 37 pieces missing from the housing, you would cordon off that area and bring in snow melt machines, whatever you have to do until you find all the pieces. But there was never a crime scene ever secured or declared there. And all of a sudden, as days and weeks go by, these officers, including former police chief Kenneth Berkowitz, who's now deceased, these guys are just driving by and like, oh, there's another piece. Look at that. Let's grab that. Nothing's photographed. Nothing's documented.
Didn't they consider this a domestic scene, not a crime, not a homicide scene initially?
Yeah. I don't know what they were declaring it initially. I believe they didn't want to make a crime scene out of it because now you have Brian Albert's front lawn, a crime scene, right across the street from Canton Deputy Police Chief Kelleher. I mean, this is all a bad look. We got a dead cop on a cop's lawn, and there's a cop that lives across the street. Like, we don't want any crime scene tape up here. That's just a bad look. And I think their initial plans of maybe he was hit by a plow or it was a domestic. I think the Karen Reed hit him with her Lexus idea came up a little later. I don't even think that was their original plan, if they had a plan at all. I don't know what their plan was. Well, so, to get all the way back to the beginning, what brought me into this?
Yeah, that's going back to that question. I was going to go back to that question, but with a little bit of a twist.
It's way more than bad police work. I believe it's been corrupt in a cover up from the get-go. I actually get frustrated with some of the people that are like, oh, this is just shoddy police work. I go, it can't be. Or it was just Proctor taking care of his buddies, the McAlberts. But even Proctor would need a lot more help from his superiors and all the way up to the DA's office. There's no way Proctor could have pulled this off by himself. But then if I talk like this,
I want to ask you, Scott, because I want to use your temper as an expert witness, okay? With all your years' experience. If you have a dead police officer, which he was, John O'Keefe was, and everyone wants justice for him, we want the right thing to be done, not the wrong thing, and you have him found at a police officer's home, what is the protocol for getting a search warrant for inside the home when somebody is found dead outside the home?
I don't know. I've heard a lot of police officers, LV Cops. I don't know if you're familiar with their channel, but they said search warrant or not, if there's a dead or dying police officer on the front lawn of another police officer, we're going in that house. We're going to check on Brian Albert, his wife, his kids. We could have 2 dead cops and a whole dead family. Search warrant be damned. Or at least bang on his door. They literally, Canton PD literally completely stayed away from his house like it was a no-go zone. Never mind all this, we need a search warrant thing. I don't know who said that in trial 1.
I'm asking you as an expert here. So really what you're saying is they could have gone in as a wellness check because you've got a dead police officer at another dead police officer's house. So wellness check or crime scene, they should have been in the house is what you're saying.
I think so. I mean, everybody I've ever talked to has the same opinion. I mean, it's almost like Canton PD shows up and they know that Brian Albert and his wife and his whatever kids that were in the house were fine. Like we don't need to bother them.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like that's crazy.
Somebody said this is it's a cop's house. That we're good. We're fine. So
I guess it just doesn't. It's. I mean, I guess some people look at it like, oh, there's no way you could have a local town police and state police detectives from the DA's office all in on this cover up. So now I got my tinfoil hat on, and you start sounding crazy. But I mean, that's what I believe, and a lot of us believe, to this moment, that this has all been a ruse. It's all been a cover up. And the sad part is because the crime scene was never secured, the house was never really truly searched. Chloe the dog disappears. She's allegedly rehomed in Vermont. I say she hasn't taken breaths in 3 years. The entire basement floor was torn out. Brian Albert quickly rushes to sell the home. I don't know how, to get back to justice for Officer John O'Keefe, I don't know how he ever get justice for John O'Keefe. Because if you believe he was beaten to the point of death or to death and dog bitten inside 34 Fairview, all the true evidence and witnesses have gotten away. It's say Karen Reed's acquitted and we're going to reopen the investigation into who really, unalived Officer John O'Keefe. Where do we begin? Sadly, even if Karen's acquitted, and I pray she is, because obviously she's innocent factually, I don't know how we ever find out what really happened to John and if anybody will ever be held accountable, sadly.
Yeah, I mean, that's the biggest injustice. And if Karen Reed is acquitted, nobody's pursuing another suspect. They're not doing any of that.
Down the street a year earlier, you had Sandra Birchborn, or unborn child, unalived by Stoughton police officer Matthew Farwell. They deemed it a suicide. It took the feds to arrest him for it. Otherwise, nobody was ever going to investigate that one either.
Yeah, the
funny thing that happens in Norfolk County,
Scott, we know about that because let me just so I get the conflict out of the way. If there is one, there really isn't. But my husband was involved in the civil case and looked at it and said, "This ain't no suicide for the civil lawyers. This is a homicide."
Oh yes, I know that. Yeah,
right. And then Dr. Michel Bryant, and then we went from there into the feds took it over. So we were and Stoughton is where you were. That's what's in Stoughton, and that's where you were today to support Aidan.
Correct. Yeah, Stoughton and Canton are buddy.
They're right next to one another. Yeah. You go by the sign. On one side it says entering Stoughton. On the other side it says entering Canton. They're right there.
Yeah. No, my point was, there's bodies piling up in Norfolk County, and if the actual or potential suspects are police officers, doesn't get investigated. Worst case scenario, Sandra Birchmore, they pinned it on the girl. She offed herself. And the case of Officer John O'Keefe, pin it on the girl. Karen Reed hit him with her Lexus. Where the true suspects, if you look at this, are cops. So they're untouchable.
That's an interesting comparison to make that there. Wow. So where do you go now? What do you do now? Any other, besides being there for the support of Aidan Kearney, Dr. Turtleboy, being there for the support of Karen Reed, what else do you do to try to make things better?
I do some activism. I write, state senators, the governor. I don't know. It's like throwing pebbles against a castle wall. But I do a lot of YouTube, moderator on several shows. I'll be moderating on Turtleboy tonight. That ought to be a big show. When I initially got involved in the Free Karen Reed movement, we didn't have these YouTube shows. We didn't have anybody covering it. You had Turtleboy, and that's it. So a lot of our initial interaction was like on the Facebook justice pages and social media like that. But this has evolved now where we have major YouTube shows covering this. And I'm glad you guys are in it too now. But we have Melanie Little, we have Young Jerks, The Glarer, Turtleboy. Now you even have the big ones like Emily D. Baker, lawyer, Larry DIY guy. So fast forward to where we are today, there's a lot more, especially YouTube, out there following this case, which wasn't the case in the beginning.
By the way, I think Dizzy pointed out, I think, yes, I think the word was, by the way, in terms of Bettero's letter was harassment. The letter itself is harassment, not retaliation. In my mind, I transposed it because they did talk about retaliation in that. But I have to tell you, my sister has come up with the best line to help this, is that maybe in the United States you have freedom of speech, but not freedom after speech. Okay? That's a great line. Thanks, Joan, for that line.
Yeah, so I mean, I think there's a serious problem, especially with D.A. Morrissey. I mean, he's been an elected politician in Massachusetts since the 70s. He used to be a state senator. But I know Larry DUI guy was talking about what's Bev's genesis, you know, how she became a judge. Her connections go back to Quincy. Michael Morrissey's political power in Massachusetts. Circa 1985, she becomes a public defender. A lot of her years actually in Quincy District Court, the epicenter of Michael Morrissey's power. And I think it was 2008. Beverly got nominated to be a judge. I think 2009. Then sitting Governor Deval Patrick. I mean, there's a system, right? There's a judge nomination council, and then you know, a sitting governor nominates you, and then it has to get cleared by the governor's council. But in Massachusetts, it's rubber stamps all the way. Basically, if you get a governor to nominate you to be judge, you're almost a shoo-in. And Bev became a district court judge in 2009. Deval Patrick was a two-term governor in Massachusetts. So toward the end of his second term, he nominated her to the Superior Court bench. So I think she was confirmed in 2014. So fast forward to today, what I think one of the problems is with Beverly Kenney is her deep-seated ties and loyalty to D.A. Morrissey. If anybody's going to accuse her of being corrupt, I would say her actions are explained by her unfettered loyalness to D.A. Morrissey.
Yeah, well, that's part of that.
That would be my black pill.
The appointment process, instead of electing judges, creates those connections that may not work out for the.
What's funny about Judge Kenney is she's normally a more liberal activist judge. Like she was a public defender for 24 years, and you look at her previous trials. Her last cop on a live trial, the Michael Chesna case. I don't know if you are familiar with that. Either one of you?
No, I'm not.
Career criminal Emmanuel Lopes, unalived Officer Chesna after getting his weapon, and then he took the weapon down the street and he unalived a woman in her house. So, you know, double. And Auntie Bev's got that trial out of that courthouse behind you. And she was worried about him not getting a fair trial out of her county jury pool. So she bussed her jury in from Worcester County on a daily basis to make sure that Emmanuel Lopes had the fairest jury possible. So Beverly normally in her trials is like sort of pro-defendant, which, you know, I don't have a problem. You know what I mean? Like if she wants to make sure that this defendant has the fairest possible trial and has a fair jury, you know, I can't argue with her, you know, bussing a jury in from another county. But that first trial ended in a mistrial because one of the jurors was a brat out of Worcester that didn't want to participate in deliberations. She kept sending the foreman back there, like trying to get her to do it. She wouldn't do it. I don't know how she couldn't be held in contempt, that juror refusing to deliberate, but that's another story for another
why did
day.
they just bounce the juror and put an alternate in there?
And she was telling the family of Officer Chesna they can't show emotion in the court. I mean, my point is she was bending over backwards to, you know, pro-defendant. You know, I would call him like a liberal activist judge. But when you see Beverly Kenney in this trial, she's like done a 180, like, you know, she's so pro-defense. It's like so out of her character. Like, so why would she be doing this? This
You
isn't.
mean pro-prosecution or pro-defense?
She's very pro-prosecution in the Karen Reed trial, but that's not her normal MO, is what I'm saying. So, like, why, every judge, you know their style, like where they're going most of the time. She's so out of character in this one. It's like shocking. Like, why is she acting this way? And if you believe in the corruption and the height of it, that like I do and a lot of us do, Bev's only acting this way because she's desperately trying to save D.A. Morrissey's office. And there's also was allegations last year when she was asked to recuse herself that she has loose ties to the McAlberts. They were renting her beach house cottage in the Cape Cod. She denied all those connections to any of the people in this case. But I would think most judges, even if there's a thought or appearance of impropriety or connections there, she should have recused herself. So why didn't she? Like, you know what I mean? Like, why put yourself in that situation, Beverly? Like, so if you look at it pessimistic like I do, G.A. Morrissey called her up and said, "Hey, Bev, you own this. You owe your whole career to me. You got to save my butt."
That's what you think, though. We don't have any proof of that. That's the thoughts.
Oh yeah, no, this is just my theories, just my opinion.
All right, you have to moderate Aidan's show tonight.
Yeah,
We're going to be one tired person. We want to thank you for coming on. We're going to talk about things that are like the motions and I wore pearls today because there was a lot of pearl ringing.
You're gonna be clutching them.
There was a lot of clutching.
It was very dramatic today. Very dramatic.
Today was a roller coaster. Bev scared me in the morning, and then I thought the judge in Stoughton was going to lock up Turtle Boy.
Yeah, it was a lot of drama.
And we've been just so you know, Justice Over TV. We're a young channel, but we've been on the YSL case. Doug Weinstein's been here. Ashley Merchant's been here. We had the first interview with Joe Tacopino on ASAP Rocky. After before where we're waiting for everything before even TMZ, and Michel Bryant has made the trip now out to Canton 3 or 4 times at least. So we've been covering this case.
Name a street after me, I think.
Yeah.
Mike's going to be a regular down there with us boots on the ground.
Yeah, we've been covering this trial for and we intend to continue covering it because once we went out on our own somewhere around mid-September and decided to do this, and this trial came up. And my history with Alan Jackson. I tried a case against Alan Jackson where I had the hung jury Specter case. He and I have a great mutual respect for each other, and also we kind of know the little bit of the players in the case. We decided to cover this and take a good hard look at it, and we call it as we see it. We call prosecution cases for them. We'll call defense cases for them. We'll call suspicious activity when we see it. We ain't going to be bought by anybody or scared by anybody because we believe in freedom of speech, both before and after.
So you haven't been paid by free Karen Reed people?
No, I haven't been paid by free Karen Reed people. And if Michel Bryant goes to jail as a result of all this, I'll bail him out.
T-shirt. I got nothing. I'm clean.
All right.
Thank you.
Nice meeting you, Linda. Nice talking to you, Michael.
You bet. We'll see you next time here, buddy.
Hopefully it was a good experience. You'll come on again.
I'll come back with a little less black-pilled view, maybe.
No, stop. Thank you.
Okay, man. Good luck tonight. Take care.
All right. Bye.
Thanks. Wow, that was interesting. Interesting that Scott came on and that you met him today. And, he, I know you were pretty busy this morning.
Look at my lights have burned out. I've been on the air too long. It's like, you're done. Lights are burned out.
You're not yet because you were on there last night because you got there last night. I think it was the Guinness that you had in the waterfall bar.
Was it the first one?
I
did have some corned beef sandwich. I'm not big on the cabbage part of the corned beef and cabbage. And I don't know if you saw it or not, but they had a bagpiper or pipe.
Yes, I saw that.
And pipist.
And your shirt.
Which was very cool. Yeah.
And then you were there this morning.
A shirt that I got a few years ago. It says, and it's got the shamrocks and stuff and the leprechaun hat. It says, "If Bryant can't fix it, we're screwed." That's because people know my DIY tendencies.
Well, I filled out my brackets. I have to tell you, and we should have a bracket here at Law and Crime for the NCAA tournament, because one of the underdogs is Bryant College.
I know. I've got a shirt.
And
I am
going to pick it, even if I think
they're
they
like
have a chance at hell
15th seed. They were in it last year. I think
yeah.
they won their first game last year, so I got a
shirt. I'm picking them again. Okay,
all
just
right.
because of you. But
upset alert.
Let's go to, and yeah, too bad we don't have time to do a Justice Served TV bracket group, but I'm going to try to fill out mine. But let's go to what happened in court. I am clutching my pearls, because that whole thing of what Judge Beverly Cannoni was going to do to Alan Jackson. And I had said to you, Michael, that something happened in that courtroom that she believed that the defense team, particularly Alan Jackson, in my opinion, wasn't telling the truth to her or to the jury about the independence of ARCA. Right or wrong, that's what she was believing, in my view. And that kind of came out today, that she felt that she somehow had been lied to with regard to that. Now, I don't see how you can, when you didn't hire them, the government hired them, and then afterwards they demand to be paid. When the trial's over, who are you going to tell? Like Ghostbusters. Hello, who are you going to tell? Who are you going to notify? All right. But that happened. So tell us about the courtroom and when that happened.
Well, that was the first thing this morning, and Scott just alluded to it, and it was, very dramatic. There's been intentional misrepresentation. That's right. There's been a lack of candor. There's been all of these horrible things that the defense has done, all of it revolving around this interaction or lack thereof with the ACA experts. Remember, there's an allegation that they were communicating with them, but at the time of the trial saying we had no contact of any kind. We were totally independent. And that's what Judge Bev is all twisted about. She believes that after her research, after reading all the papers, after looking at the transcripts from the trial, that there was, in fact, some intentional misrepresentation about the connection between ACA and the defense team. So she's hanging that over the courtroom and like, this is, it's like she's about to yank somebody from the defense team. And what I thought was odd, and I'll ask you, I had no experience like this. I've never seen this, where the judge calls the defense team up to the bench and says, prosecution, stay, sit, stay. And then she has the defendant herself come up to talk about possible sanctions, since she has found this intentional conduct that is so outrageous. Have you ever had that before, where just one side is called up to determine some sort of issue like this?
No, I've never seen that, where she sealed the record. She called up one side. They had to know, because the prosecution didn't say, "Oh, judge, but we want to be there,"
No.
I've never seen that before,
they were smart to just put their hands in their pockets, and not beg to be up there, because, they could see this is going our way, right?
So I think they thought that Alan Jackson was going to be yanked.
Yeah, she did say at some point, Mr. Yannetti can handle this case himself.
Right. She wanted to know who was lead counsel, and they were very smart. They said, we don't define our roles that way. And then she said, because Mr. Yannetti can handle it himself. So that was very interesting.
So in theory, if Alan Jackson had said, I'm lead counsel, then that would have saved him, I guess, in theory, right? The others must therefore be expendable. So in the end, of course, she's just a lot of BS and bluster and no result.
Well, do you know whether or not she did fine? We don't know whether she fined and imposed any sanctions.
It could have been. Well, monetary sanctions, I guess she didn't share with anybody. But there's no removal sanction, and there's no testimonial prohibition sanction. No ACA experts are going to be prohibited from testifying, or really, based on everything else I've seen, limited in what they're going to testify to. Remember, Rentschler is the non-MD that was prohibited from testifying about things arguably connected to be, an MD. But now that Crosby. Crosby's a whole different issue.
Right.
Crosby's being allowed to testify to medical things, and he's not an MD. Does that mean that Rentschler is going to get to testify to those things too?
No, and then you also have the issue today of this doctor who is, I think it's Wolf with an E, right? Because there's two doctors.
Is this the one with the E? I get them confused.
I'm getting confused. Well, it's not my favorite name anyhow, but I just think of Jack Nicholson in the movie Wolf. Although I love Jack Nicholson, it's kind of scared me. But anyhow, who said that he is not a medical examiner. He is not a forensic pathologist.
He's a neurosurgeon. He's a
He's a
brilliant man.
There's been a flaw and all sorts of stuff, and they're going to try to get around the fact that the Commonwealth had 2 medical examiners, very well versed, who wouldn't say this was a homicide, right? By having somebody testify as to a mechanism of death, making possibly a contra coup injury, that it's a fall to the ground from being hit by a car or being scared to being hit by a car. And you know what the main thing is? I mean, because this is what I've done since I was a prosecutor. This is the kind of work I've done. That man, that doctor, he couldn't sign a death certificate unless it was his patient, like a heart disease or something. We talked about this, and they died of cancer. They die at home. They've been under treatment by their doctor. They can sign a death certificate. But in a suspicious death that's been referred to a medical exam, he can't sign a death certificate. He can't make the manner of death. He's prohibited from under statute.
Yeah. So that's the argument that the defense is making. And we should note the autopsy.
Well, actually, I didn't hear that. I saw
death.
Yeah. They did, but they didn't say that explicitly. They didn't say the statute prohibits it. They said, well, he's not allowed to do it. The mechanism, the death is a way around the manner of death. But they should say it in the statute. By allowing this in, it's causing a violation of that statute.
Yeah. Well, according to Brennan, this guy is better than an ME or an FP, a forensic pathologist. He is better because the way he phrased this, I'll never forget it. He talks about the neurosurgeon having done thousands of these brain surgeries, right? And he said, but a lot of people died.
Right.
A lot of people died. So he knows about death as it relates to brain injury. So, I mean, talk about, I'm not putting that on my advertising. I've operated on a lot, but a lot have died. So that, in Brennan's mind, says this guy is an expert that can talk about this potential contra coup injury. And I was reading up on that, and it's not something that you would normally see from being hit by a car. It's more impact with the ground or impact
with a chair, like a baby death. We see a lot of baby. Somebody takes a baby and slams the head, and you get a contra coup injury.
Even the theoretical discredited shaken baby syndrome.
Even that, right?
Has that theory, and the theory is your head hits so hard in one direction, the brain bangs against the other side of your skull.
Right, that's the theory.
It's a very specific type injury. So that would happen if you hit what? Rock hard ground.
Rock hard ground, right? Yeah. That happens so you have to have the immovable object being hit by the movable object, right? And you can get a contra coup injury, right? That's the medical lesson, the forensic lesson from those of us who have to cross-examine people our whole careers on this.
Okay, so let's talk now, since we're on this vein, let's talk about one of your favorites, because I didn't get into it in too much detail earlier today, and that's the blood extrapolation and the serum.
Yeah, they didn't get into it in too much detail either.
Well, they did talk about it, and there was no decision made.
Right.
But and both sides are arguing about it, right? The defense says no, because this was taken under the circumstances that was not anticipating criminal activity. It was more like a diagnostic tool, right? We just want to take some blood. From that, we get a blood alcohol level, and then the prosecution wants to take that number and extrapolate it to a BAC at the time of the incident.
Right, but they don't know. And with hospitals, and I've had this issue a number of times, and we basically won on this issue, is that hospitals are not certified. They don't have the equipment and this stuff. They don't have a gas chromatography. They don't even know if you're doing biolicid. They don't know how we're doing this. We don't know if the blood draw was by the DUI standards, where you don't use alcohol to clean anything. We have no idea what the circumstance. That's what the defense was saying. You have no idea the procedures, the protocol. There's no accreditation. We just don't know, because what hospitals do is they look. Somebody comes in. Hey, is there any alcohol in the system, so we know how to treat them with drugs and non-drugs, and what to give them or not if they got alcohol. But they don't really care about whether their levels are appropriate, the levels are constant. They're not doing it. They're not doing all the stuff that a forensic certified accredited lab does. And that's what the defense is arguing. And my feeling is just like the first one. She's going to let it in. She's going to say, well, you can cross-examine.
Yeah, and then on cross-examination, you could tear into it. Yeah. Right.
Yeah, right. But the damage is done because because you already get the retrograde extrapolation, which, by the way, in most states, then you can't challenge. And many states have that in a DUI. You can't challenge a retrograde extrapolation once you get it, once the prosecution puts it in.
Interesting. So here's another one I want to talk to you about, because I mentioned it to Aidan this morning before the bomb dropped in Stoughton. And that was his question about the witnesses that can be in the courtroom or can follow the trial versus those that can't. We know that family members and experts pretty much excluded from any sort of sequestration for that, right? And so I asked Aidan, I said, are you guys going to seek some sort of exemption from that prohibition? He said, well, I don't really want to get into our legal theory too much, but we are considering some options, I think is how he phrased it. In fact, I think it's in the interview I did with him, if you get a chance to take a look at that. So what do you think? Is that going to be a winning argument that he wants to cover this as a journalist, therefore he should be accepted from the witness sequestration?
Well, it is interesting because there was some mention, I forget which courtroom was, is that we'd have to set parameters of how he can come into the courtroom through the barriers to not have contact. Remember that? I think it was Judge Walsh discussed it to cover it when he was appeared before Judge Walsh, our person of the week last week in Stoughton courts, that he could cover it as a journalist. So there should be some type of exemption made that he can go in as a journalist and cover it. Especially, you can make the movie. What are you going to testify about? Let the prosecution do a proffer of proof. Let the third party. First, Judge Bev would have to have Mark Betterow or somebody, maybe it's Braid'll, come in and say, what's the proffer of proof, that he can't be in there? Maybe it's just a limited time he can't be in there for certain limited testimony, right?
And it also could reveal that they have no reason to really call the guy.
Right.
If they're really pressed on it, they put somebody on the stand and they have a voir dire or offer of proof and they can't fulfill it because, let's face it, we think they're just jerking him around. That's why they put him on the witness list.
Right. I absolutely believe that. There's no way they're going to show witness intimidation with Karen Reed, or else she'd be indicted for it.
Yep. Yeah, they, in theory, as we understand the Commonwealth's theory, they want to use that connection to show consciousness of guilt. She was trying to create a cover story because she was guilty about what she did. That's the theory.
How about she's trying to have a journalist on her side because she's innocent and being railroaded? That's the other theory, right? And so which one do you choose against? First Amendment, or do you give the prosecutor free rein? I mean, I think it's a worrisome situation where you could, because then you could put any journalist, right? You could put you on that witness list, Michel Bryant. What did they say to you as you were doing an interview? They said they're pretty confident. Why are they confident? How do you know that? Why did you report it?
Luckily, I don't take notes. Oh, when I do an interview, so that would be all right.
Right.
I think in any other case, we might not be having this discussion because it would not be a possibility, right? But in this case, I don't discount anything.
Right. In this case, and by the way, I love Scott's interview, but he said now all the big people are on this case. I think he excluded the big people. It was like a backhanded slap.
I know.
It's okay.
Earlier today, when I was talking with Dina, and we've only been doing this a few months, so I get it. But I was talking to Dina, and she was talking about the notoriety and how it had grown, and she starts ticking off all of these people, and after about the 10th one, she says, "And Justice Serve TV." I said, I was hoping you'd get to us eventually. Thank you.
Yeah, the place, right. As we said, the place people come to be interviewed, okay, because we do have the street cred given our history and all. But then there was, so that she didn't allow him in, but then didn't the prosecution also file other motions today? Like a plethora of motions last night or today?
New ones from yesterday?
Yeah, I think there was the motion to exclude a defense, Michael Easter's opinion of the investigation. There was a motion.
That's the Michael Easter's the retired FBI guy who wants to give opinions on inadequacies of the investigation. I can't imagine he has anything to work with, right?
That interrupted Scott McGinness. Hey, the backhanded insult was not intended. We know that, Scott, and we love your interview.
Giving you a hard time, bud. And tell Dina the same thing. So that's what they don't want him to testify to, saying he has no training in that, no experience. He's a cell phone guy, I guess, for the most part. But this was an interesting concern that the Commonwealth has about Easter. They think his testifying about inadequate police investigation indirectly supports the defense third-party culprit defense. Okay? And they're saying that as opposed to a Bowden defense, which is more the cops did a shit job, that's why you don't have the real story here. That's what the defense would bring. They say that by using that analysis, it supports a third-party culprit. The law enforcement did a horrible job investigating, therefore they missed a third-party culprit. So the Commonwealth is saying we can't get into third-party culprits. And so by letting them bring an expert in to say the cops were horrible, that supports a third-party culprit argument.
Did she hear that today? Did she hear that motion?
No,
That's tomorrow.
no. Yeah. This was just filed yesterday, and says if anything, the probative value is outweighed by the prejudice. Well, that's a throwaway argument you make no matter what. Yeah. Here's what I want to ask you about. One of the new ones.
Okay.
Talk about bias. We'll skip that one. We talked about the buffer zone a little bit. When
you say bias, that's the Commonwealth's opposition to defendant's motion in limine to allow evidence of lack of bias.
It's like, there's like negative to the negative to the negative. The defense wants to be able to show they were not biased and connected to the ACA experts.
Right.
Okay. So that's their negative. And then the Commonwealth wants to say, no, we want to prove that there was bias. So they want to just prove that there wasn't bias. So you take all the negatives out of the way there, and it's all about whether or not the defense was connected to the ACA experts to the degree that it affected their opinions.
Right. But they did agree, defense and the Commonwealth and defense did agree to the defense's motion that the payment of the ACA witnesses is not mentioned in voir dire. So that was an agreement that they came to.
Yes, nobody seemed to be fighting about that. So Dr. Welcher, he's the biomechanical.
Right.
Commonwealth objecting to the defendant's motion. That the defense wants him out because he was going to be testifying to the cause of the injury, and his experience doesn't support that he has the ability to do that. Commonwealth said, we're not going to ask him about that. So obviously,
if they do, but they want him out, but they want the neurosurgeon who's not a forensic pathologist.
He's a genius, the neurosurgeon, that guy. He's a genius.
I get this.
And then the Commonwealth also wants to exclude Garrett Wing. Now,
His report we don't know. You said you looked him up, right?
We know nothing about. I looked him up, and he's a canine expert. He was in the law enforcement for 17 years with the canine unit and also the narcotics canine unit. So I can only assume he's going to talk about dog bites and dog attacks and dog behavior. But the Commonwealth is upset because all they got was a CV. So let me get your take on this, as I was kind of just throwing out possibilities. If he has filed reports, if he has written opinions, those have to be provided. I'm assuming
if he filed reports, so he has opinion. In Massachusetts, you don't have to provide an actual report. You can provide a summary.
A summary. Yeah. But all they got was the CV, the curriculum vitae. Yeah. They got nothing else. So the question becomes, maybe he hasn't prepared anything yet. Maybe he was retained recently.
Right.
And you've got to disclose who it is, even if you don't know what it is specifically they might be testifying to.
Right. That he's consulting with.
They're going to come back and say, if you wait till you get the report or till you get a summary of opinions and you miss the deadline for disclosure, then they're going to throw that in your face and say, well, no, you never disclosed this person. So you got to disclose them, even if at the time you do, you don't have much.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I mean, if they consulted with him, he hasn't had time, because remember, we just had the ruling. They still had they were still reconsidering the ruling. Remember about whether or not the other dog bite expert from the prosecution, and I put that loosely, could testify. So if you're going to have that, you had to consult with somebody else who may be in rebuttal too. It may not even be on their case, because you're dealing now possible witnesses with rebuttal that you may know about. And not even witnesses on your direct case, right?
Right. Yeah. And that's how could you disagree with that? You got to come clean with all the bodies, and you tell what you can when you know it. But if you don't know it, you got to give the names. And
I guess they have to provide a witness list by.
I thought it was end of today. Yeah.
So that means it should be published tomorrow, because usually what we see, and I don't think there's been. Have you checked? Has anyone, Dizzy? Have you checked to see whether or not Judge Kearney issued any rulings or any orders while we've been on the air? Because sometimes they get filed like at 4:55, and then all of a sudden surprise, or we become aware of them tomorrow morning. Right, Michael? We don't know.
I'm sorry, I got distracted. If Crosby is allowed in, then Garrett Wing should be allowed. I would certainly agree with that. I agree with that too. There's an egregious lack of experience, let him in. let cross-examination, new one. What kind of weight to give that person. But they got to at least.
Dizzy says nothing. She's just checking. Nothing. We're just checking. So we don't have anything. But we
thought she had a hair appointment this afternoon. That's why I thought she canceled everything.
No. Apparently, from what's being reported, the one of the prosecutors was sick.
Oh.
And it may have been the lead prosecutor was sick, and that's why it got put off to.
You mean Brennan was sick?
I don't know if it was Brennan or one of the other two prosecutors who are entered an appearance at counsel table. So apparently Garrett Wing has been on. He was on an attorney Melanie Little's channel, and apparently he's great. But obviously, a lot of times you're doing. So the judge hadn't ruled on a lot of these motions, and still hasn't, right? So you want to find experts that maybe can be in rebuttal. And you're kind of up against it with this deadline now that, you got this April 1st trial, right?
Yeah.
And also I don't even know how they're preparing for the trial. They're here in court every single day. Right.
Yeah. It's 2 weeks from today.
Oh, wow. And that doesn't include the fact that you're getting the jury impaneled. You got if you have a jury expert or if you have your own internal experts, you got to go, there's a lot to be done. People don't realize the amount of work.
So this would be 2 weeks from today would be the day that the pool first shows up. And Judge Bev said it's going to be big. I mean, she didn't give a number, but she said we have a lot of jurors coming in here. And that's when they were talking about, let's talk about this real quick before we wrap things up here. I'll be doing a midnight show. I
want you to have a safe drive home because I know you're going to be driving home.
Yeah, it'll be fine. I'll stop for an ice cream. It'll be great. So they talked about the questionnaire, the jury questionnaire, because there was a motion regarding voir dire of the panel. This was one of the few that they got to this morning. And Mr. Jackson's concerns were very specific about, are you experienced with people driving under the influence, with domestic violence? And I started thinking, having looked at the last year's questionnaire just a couple of days ago, those things are all on there, on the questionnaire. And what the judge ultimately decided was, we're going to do the questionnaire. We're not going to have group questions with the attorneys. Once we get to the individual prospective jurors, yes, you can have some Q&A, but we're going to do a questionnaire. So each of you, I want you to come up with one page, defense team, prosecution team, one page for the questionnaire, and then, we'll meld that together. So that's what they're going to do. And I think, just because I got it here, see if I can pull it up. We can look at a couple of things on here. This is the questionnaire from last year. Let's see if I can find it here. Hold on.
Yeah, I just have it out of my reach. Mine is over there because this file seems to be grown. It's almost like one of my own files.
I thought I had it available. Maybe I don't. No. Anyway, I've got it and I can look at it, but it doesn't help you, does it? So
that's okay. You look at it, and mine's way over there. I mean, I could go off camera and do it, but
this is a 2-pager, total of 29 questions. And it talks about things like, have you been a victim of violent crime? Have you or your family members or close friends been involved in domestic violence? Anything about a crash reconstructionist testimony that would make it difficult for you to be fair or impartial? Have you been involved in a group organization, participation in a march, demonstration campaign, or donated money on behalf of an organization or cause that was against driving under the influence, such as SAD, Students Against Drunk Driving, or MAD, Mothers Against Drunk Driving? Anyone involved in an incident involving drinking and driving. So all of those questions that Mr. Jackson had asked about today to be done in the form of kind of general questioning is going to be incorporated in a questionnaire very similar to what they used last time.
Yeah, this is not a big deal. I mean, this is kind of standard questions. A lot of times, judges ask those just from the bench, and that's what she's planning to do. And if there's follow-up, I guess she'll have follow-up individually at sidebar, and it'll probably be sealed, right? That's pretty much the same. I don't see her going much beyond what she's doing because she's not going to extend this trial, and that's why I don't think she wanted the voir dire by the attorneys. Although the voir dire by the attorneys usually gets you into some things that are pretty important sometimes that the standard questionnaire does not.
Yeah, we'll see how tightly she reins them in, but she did suggest they can get some individual questioning in. So,
right.
And I don't know. We'll have to find out how many alternates there are going to be and how many peremptory challenges per side they're going to be.
Yeah, I don't remember that from the first trial. Whether she has more alternates, I don't know. She's going to try to keep this tight, try to keep this a tighter trial. But with all these witnesses coming in and this cross-examination, I don't see how this is going to be tighter.
Yeah, you always think about, I was talking to, I think it was Dina about it. Sometimes on a retrial, we see things kind of
tell people
streamlined.
who Dina is. Tell people who Dina is. Those who don't know.
Yeah, Dina is one of the lightning rods that has spent time with the Free Care and Read movement from the beginning. And as with Scott, these folks are more about, the overall systemic problem. The Care and Read case is one of them. But of course, Sandra Birchmore and others, they see as are part of the bigger issue. So I was talking to her at lunch, and I said, I get the feeling this case, where we see second cases quite often kind of streamlined and truncated because people have learned things first time around, I think this one's going to be a mess. I think it's going to be bigger,
right,
and maybe longer than the first.
Maybe longer, and maybe longer. I agree. Especially we see it just in motions. Look at the motions when Hank Brennan, because Hank Brennan is a defense attorney. He's not really a prosecutor, so he's going to be trying to get at when he cross-examines. He's going to be cross-examining as a defense attorney, not as a prosecutor, who normally don't cross-examine that well, right? We see it all the time. That unless you've had that experience. Scott,
there was
by the
an
way,
interesting.
he
go
says
ahead.
the trial questionnaire is staying about the same, and I agree.
I think so too. There was something that happened earlier today when this is more an indication of how the court sees the players, but there was a motion by the defense, and I can't remember the very specifics, but the prosecution said, we don't have any real objection to that. What would normally happen? Okay, it's done. We're in.
Right.
No. Judge Bev wanted argument by the defense for an unopposed motion.
That doesn't usually happen. By the way, all of you have been watching. We've had over 400. There's now over 300. And there's a lot of other people lurking, by the way, in the background. Okay, not just chatters. Hit that like button, because we can't get into that algorithm on YouTube unless you hit that like button. We have, we've grown from like 200 subscribers in the past 5 months to over 7,000 because of our viewers hitting that like button. So you have to hit that like button. Then you can share, subscribe, and all that. All that's free. And we'll try to keep giving you the content. And Michael's traveling all over. Michael's been to Tennessee. He's been to Florida. He's been to Atlanta for YSL. He's now here in Canton. I think you're going to be registered to vote in Canton pretty soon, Michael.
Pretty soon. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it doesn't matter. Voting here doesn't really matter.
So please hit that like button. Yeah. All right. Anything else you want to go over before we say goodbye to everyone?
I can't think of anything that we haven't covered. I'm sure once I sign off, I will think of a few things, but no, I'm good. And tomorrow there's nothing happening here.
Well, there is. We're going to have a show tomorrow night.
Well, yeah, I mean
right?
here.
Oh, here.
Nothing.
Here.
Nothing relating to the Care and Read case. I'm sure they'll be doing something here. But then, they'll be back at it Thursday. So yeah, we'll come up with something for tomorrow for Justice Serve TV.
Right, and it'll probably be 6 o'clock, so people can get off work and be around. And we want to thank all of our boots on the ground. Yes, Dina, Scott, and everyone, and the Glare who found him, right? Actually, and didn't reveal his name that night.
Will?
Will, yeah, Will's great, and everyone. So because we're going to be following this, so. Michel Bryant, I know you have some words of wisdom.
I think it's time to hit the road. I'm Michel Bryant. Hey, see you next time. Try to do the right thing.
And I'm Linda Kenney Baden. And of course, we wish Michel Bryant safe home, safe travel, so we can have him on tomorrow night. And we will see you tomorrow night. But in the meantime, remember, hit that like button, subscribe, share, and hit that notify all. See ya.